Hello everybody. This video will be the first part of a series on Maya's modeling toolkit. To start out, I will create a sphere. The modeling toolkit is found here on the right side of the user interface. I'm going to click back on the channel box so that I can show you another place that you can access the modeling toolkit. You can also find the modeling toolkit if you go to Windows, Modeling Editors, Modeling Toolkit. With my object selected, if I go to the top of the modeling toolkit, there are options here for switching to object mode, vertex mode, edge mode, and face mode, as well as UVs, which I will cover in a later video. Clicking on the vertex icon will switch it to vertex mode, and now I can select the vertices on my polygon object. Switching over to edges, I can select my edges. And the face button will allow me to switch it to face mode. And if I wish to go back to object mode, I can click on the object mode button. In this video, we'll be going over the tools under the Mesh tab. I'm going to create another polygon mesh, a cube. So that you can see everything in my scene, I'm going to open up the outliner. Notice that I have two objects in my scene, a cube and a sphere. I am going to select them both. And with both of these polygon primitives selected, I will click on the Combine button. Notice in my outliner that these two objects have now become a single object, which you can see here in the outliner. Notice that there are also these two additional nodes in my outliner. With my object selected, I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History. Deleting history will get rid of these unnecessary nodes. And now my sphere and cube is a single polygon object. And if I press 4 on my keyboard, you can see that all the geometry still exists, even though it is now a single object. Pressing 5 returns me to shaded mode. And like any other object in Maya, I can rotate, translate, and scale it. And even though it is a single object now, notice that I can still separate them. With this object selected, I will once again go to my modeling toolkit, but this time I'll click on Separate. It is once again two objects now, but it's been put into a group. Here are the two objects nested in the group. Let's take a look at a practical use of the Combine tool. You'll remember that in an earlier video I showed you how you could make a table out of polygon primitives. In that example I used groups. I also limited myself to just using object mode. Now that you've been introduced to component mode, we can take this a little further. In component mode, I'm going to scale down the bottom face of this leg for my table so that it tapers. This will give the table a little more style. Using snap to grid, I'm going to place this table leg And I'll duplicate the table leg 3 times. And to create the tabletop, I'll use another polygon cube, which I will scale non-uniformly. I'll make a few quick adjustments of the legs of the table. And I'll place the tabletop. A few more quick readjustments. And I will duplicate the tabletop yet again for the actual surface of the top of the table. Notice that I have all the objects of my table here in the outliner. They are all separate polygon objects. I'm going to select all of the objects of my table, and then going to the modeling toolkit, I will combine them. My table is now a single polygon object. However, if we look at it in the outliner, you will notice that the table has a number of nodes under input. This is the table's history. And that's why I have these extra nodes in the outliner. So, with my table selected, I will go to Edit, Delete by Type History. Notice that the nodes in the outliner disappeared, and you'll also notice that the history is no longer there in the channel box either. And of course I can now take this object and move it, rotate, and scale, both uniformly and non-uniformly. The next tool we'll look at is the boolean. To demonstrate this, I am going to create 2 overlapping cubes. The order I select these 2 cubes is important. I'm going to select the large one first and then the smaller one by shift-clicking it. Now that I have the 2 objects selected, I'm going to click on the boolean button. Notice that a little pop-up appears. There are 3 different operations that we can do with a boolean. The default is union. By selecting the operation field and then selecting difference, I get a different result. The cube that I selected second now cuts away from the original cube. And if I change the operation to intersection, the only part that remains is the area where the 2 meshes overlap. I will switch the operation back to difference. The boolean tool is powerful. However, there are some drawbacks. The face I currently have selected is a quad. It has 4 edges, as does this face. It also has 4 edges. This face, however, is not a quad. As you can see, it has 8 edges. This is not necessarily a problem. However, if you can, you should try to have your models consisting of quads and tris. In other words, 4-sided and 3-sided polygon faces. Earlier, I told you about deleting history. Let's take a look at the history of this object. Under the inputs, I can see the boolean operation. And because I haven't yet deleted the history, I can select some of these nodes in the outliner and still arrange and move them. Notice that I can still scale and rotate this second cube. And the way that it cuts into the first cube will update. I'm going to select my object now. And what I want you to take note of is the history in the channel box, as well as these extra nodes in the outliner. Again, I'm going to go to Edit, Delete by Type, History, which will eliminate those nodes and will get rid of the history. Let's do a quick comparison of combine and boolean. I'm going to create a cube and a sphere, and I will make these two polygon primitives overlap one another. And by hitting Ctrl D, I will duplicate and move my duplicate to the side. Selecting the first cube and sphere, I will combine them. And they become a single object. And selecting the second cube and sphere, I will do a boolean. I can work with the object I did the combine on as a single object, and I can do the same with the one that I did the boolean on. I'm going to switch over to wireframe mode so that we can look at the difference between the two. Notice that the example where I combined kept all the geometry, while the boolean got rid of the geometry where the two forms were overlapping. It back into shaded mode and then turn on X-ray, perhaps you can see this a little bit better. I'm going to turn off X-ray. Notice that while I don't have the pop-up for the boolean operation anymore, I can go to the channel box and under the inputs, I can still change it from union to difference or intersection. And because I haven't deleted history yet, I can still move the two separate parts of the boolean operation. Now that I'm done making my adjustments, I'm going to go ahead and delete history on both of these objects. It is generally a good idea to periodically delete history on your models. I'll be going over deleting history more in depth in a future video. And finally, we'll look at one more operation under Mesh in the Modeling Toolkit. For this example, I'm going to create 4 cubes. And for each one of the cubes, I'm going to increase the subdivision's width, height, and depth so that they have more resolution. With the first cube selected, which has the lowest resolution, I'm going to go to my modeling toolkit and click on the Smooth button. Notice that it not only increases the resolution of the mesh, but also softens the form. I can increase the divisions in the pop-up that appears. Notice what happens when I do smooths on these other cubes that have greater resolution. While they also become smoothed, they still retain more of their cube form. An awareness of this can actually be used to great effect in your 3D modeling. In my next video, I will be covering components in the modeling toolkit. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and thank you for watching.